वेदांत देख सारे के सारे डॉक्यूमेंट्स हो चुके हैं। ये कैसा फाइलर है?
Keep all the students on mute. Viraj, Dheeraj, keep all the students on mute.
Yes, I think students, please ensure there is a guest coming in from outside. You have to respect and keep every time mute. There are sometimes voices from your houses that are audible. It's not good. So students, please keep yourself silent until you have been told to unmute and talk.
Hello.
Good morning, Mr. Deora.
Hi, morning. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you so much. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you.
So Dr. Ramchandani is here.
Good morning.
Dr. Rani Tyagi
How
is
are you?
here. So
I'm good. I'm good. Welcome
Nice
to HR in online mode.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yes, over to Chandni.
How are you, Dr. Ramchandani? Otherwise, all well?
I'm good. I'm good. How are you, Milinji?
I spoke to Mr. Hiranandani the other day. I told him, in fact,
Okay.
that we spoke about the building. And
Yeah, you must visit HR offline
of course,
and see the
anytime.
changes you're bringing in.
As I mentioned to you, I'm not an alma mater, but I feel like one.
We will make you do MBA from here.
Pleasure.
I think you must know that you are meeting first year students today. These are degree students or undergraduate students who will be joining us and actually joined us from this year. And we call them as brand ambassadors of HR. They join HR because the minute they join, they carry HR on their shoulder and their achievements make HR. So we always call them as brand ambassadors of HR college. So you will be meeting these first years who are BMS, BAV, BBI, BCom, multiple courses who have joined 23-24 batch.
Excellent. Looking forward to it. Chandani, just from a time point of view, so, it should be all right to go up to 11:30.
thank you. I can see how considerate you have been today.
No, in the sense that my other meeting is a little. I can get out by 11:30. If we can have a hard stop at 11:30, that's fine.
Great. We'll try definitely to cap it by 11:20 so that you get that 10-minute breather. So can we begin? Pooja ma'am, can we begin?
Yeah, proceed. Please go ahead.
Ansha and Neha, shall we start?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
Yeah, please.
Youth is not a time in life, but the state of mind. And it is during this time that you lead and inspire. For it is from the young leaders that the world will learn and grow.
Good morning to one and all present here. I, Neha.
And I, Ansha, are here to welcome you back to the Induction Lecture Series. Welcome to this remarkable series of knowledgeable lectures featuring our honorable guest who will undoubtedly enrich your wisdom. This unique platform offers you the chance to gain expert insights and to be explored to a plethora of new ideas.
I would now like to formally welcome our source of unwavering determination and perseverance, our backbone, the principal of HR College, Dr. Pooja Ramchandani. along with our degree college vice principals, Dr. Naveen Punjabi, Dr. Rani Tyagi, and Dr. Jasbir Sodi, and all the other faculty members present here. We are elated to have you all here with us today. Moving on, I would like to invite Dr. Chandni Bhattacharjee, Professor in the Department of Environmental Studies and Director of International Initiatives here at HR College, to welcome our honorable guest speaker for the day, Mr. Milind Deora.
Thank you so much, Neha. And before I begin, I think I should thank Mr. Deora for taking his time out from his busy schedule. He's coming in from another meeting, going into another. In between, he is at least agreed to talk to our students. That shows his level of passion. And he's always been very, very encouraging to HR College. So for me, it's a deja vu moment. I think 2016 or 17, I don't really recall. Mr. Deora and myself, we had a interaction at HR College. It was on our conference room. I don't know how much of that he would remember. Very interesting, because at that time also he was very encouraging to the students. So introducing Mr. Deora to you, Mr. Milind Deora, he is the former Union Minister of State and Member of Parliament, Government of India. And he is an epitome of youthful leadership and social sensitivity. As an NDTV report describes him as a typical Mumbaikar who means business. Having entered the Lok Sabha in 2004 as a member of INC, he effectively worked his way as the Union Minister of State for Communication and Information Technology. He was often called the laptop minister due to his hands-on attitude in tackling issues. He held various positions in the parliamentary committees on defense, civil aviation, estimates, urban development, and information technology, including shipping. Prior to entering politics, he worked in a private sector in the United States and set up one of India's first digital PPP models to provide economically challenged students free access to information technology-enabled education. His contribution to the city of Mumbai, which he is a Mumbaikar, as I said, as a member of parliament, has been witnessed in the infrastructure projects like the stormwater drain project, social initiatives like the computer education policy, youth initiatives like the Youth Parliament, Youth Speak, awareness on the RTI, soccer hunt, to name a few. Mr. Deora, he has also been an environmental enthusiast, and I couldn't stop mentioning that here, with an association with the board of Arctic Circle with Boston College, which he is an alma mater. United Nations Health Innovation Exchange based in Geneva, and US-India Strategic Partnership Forum based in Washington, DC. With HR College, Mr. Deora has always been very, very supportive, and we are indeed privileged that he has associated with us for our rainwater harvesting plant. I think you will remember, Mr. Deora, you had inaugurated that for us. You had also been a part with us with the Young Parliamentarian scheme, in which several of our students were a part of the Parliament visit, and of course, all the cooperation that you have extended. So to introduce one of the youngest parliamentarians in India, who is erudite, dynamic, candid, transformative, emphatic, enthusiastic, and of course, passionate. Thank you, Mr. Deora. But what you must always remember here, students, is to learn how quickly, at the age of 24, I think he picked up and he became the member of parliament, and of course, ministers shortly after that. What we need to learn from him is that he's a musician at heart. He plays the guitar absolutely very well. You can hear his concerts if you are lucky. We've never been lucky. And of course, I must inform him that today, with the change in the logo also, at a Twitterite, all the Twitterites that support him have actually exceeded 1.7 million for him. So welcome, Mr. Deora. Thank you very much for being here. At one message, he's always been there to support us, give that peppy talk to the students, which will lead them to take and lead a fantastic life. I'll stop this with, since you're a musician, I'll stop with one of my favorite Singers, lyricists, words, that's Bob Dylan. Some people feel the rain, others get wet. So let's enjoy your talk. Thank you very much on a rainy day. I would also like to welcome here Kavya, who's a TYBMS student who will do the moderating in the session with Mr. Deora. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Without any further ado, let us kickstart our session now. So, sir, Mumbai has been your home ground for the longest time. And over the years, you've seen this city of dreams come a long, long way. As Chandni ma'am mentioned, we know how you've revamped the stormwater drain project and also initiated the debate on RTI. So how have you envisioned Mumbai by 2050, considering all the challenges? And I think the most prominent one being the pressure of increasing population.
Well, a very good morning to everybody. Firstly, let me thank everyone at HR College, the faculty, the students for inviting me, for having me here. In particular to Dr. Ramchandani, I'm grateful to her for her friendship, her leadership. I'm grateful to Dr. Chandni for the undue praise, the very kind introduction for the Bob Dylan quote. I hope none of us are getting wet today. We're enjoying the rain, but we're not getting wet, hopefully. And thank you, Kavya, for being the moderator. I look forward to this session. And it's always a pleasure, as you mentioned, Dr. Chandni, it's always a pleasure for me to be back at HR, albeit virtually today. But I look forward to being back with you in person for a physical session once your building is up and ready. I think it's, before I come to the question, Kavya, about Mumbai, for me, the topic that you have invited me to speak on and to share ideas on leadership, I think is a fascinating topic because I can give you the very trite, hackneyed response about what I think is leadership and a monologue as such. But when you and I spoke, I said I prefer to have this dialogue where we can interact. I can take some student questions, talk about different facets of leadership, different facets about changes that we're seeing in our world today. Leadership on its own, for instance, has evolved so much in the last several decades. For instance, with a hyper social media era that we live in, we often mistake leadership for high quality oratory, for your physical presentation, not necessarily your values and the content of your presentation. And in politics, for instance, I remember when Adolf Hitler was new on the scene in Germany, most Germans thought he was a fantastic leader at the time because his oratory skills were incredible. In fact, today, if you go to YouTube and you look at Hitler's speeches, despite the rhetoric and the content, which is obviously troubling, one can't deny that he was a good orator. But we may not remember a single speech of Mahatma Gandhi, yet Mahatma Gandhi is regarded as the greatest political leader that the world has ever seen, who provided the world with a direction of how to solve political problems. In South Africa, in the United States of America, how to fight for civil rights and do it peacefully, non-violently, based on India's dharmic principles. Similarly, in the business space, when you look at a man like Steve Jobs, you look at a great revolutionary like Henry Ford, who created the first automobile in the world. You look at great Indian entrepreneurs like J.R.D. Tata. Not necessarily great orators, not necessarily great communicators. You wouldn't remember a speech of Steve Jobs. You wouldn't remember a speech of J.R.D. Tata. But it's their actions, their innovations, their ideas, which allow them to hold good stead even today, where people still remember them for what they implemented. You then have a person like an Elon Musk, who is kind of interesting on both levels. He's a good communicator, he's a maverick, but at the same time, he's extremely innovative. He's a future thinker. So I think leadership is facing a massive challenge. The factors and the parameters by which we determine good and bad leadership has changed. And I think people being aware across different professions, what do you really want in a leader? Identifying that is a very critical issue. And hopefully, Kavya, those are topics we can touch upon when we walk through this moderated session.
Definitely.
As far as Mumbai goes, yes, you're right. Mumbai has been, Mumbai is my home. Mumbai is not just my not just a place I fight elections from. It's my home. Regardless of what happens, whatever the political outcomes may be in my life, this is a city I live in. This is a city my family lives in. This is a city I work in. And I obviously want the best for Mumbai. I always have. I think that, Mumbai has changed considerably in the last 20 years. So for instance, in the few months ahead, you will see transformative projects, which frankly have been initiated by government A and have been implemented by government B, or maybe by government C. There have been so many governments led by so many different political parties that have seen these projects through. If you look at the coastal road, if you look at the Trans-Harbour Ceiling, which will connect Mumbai city to the hinterland, will provide access to Navi Mumbai International Airport, completely decongest the island city in the same way that the Brooklyn Bridge did in the 1880s. It decongested Manhattan and allowed people living in the suburbs, the hinterland, to work in Manhattan and yet have a better quality of lifestyle. You will start to see those changes once the Trans-Harbour Ceiling is implemented. So I'm extremely hopeful. I think that a city like Mumbai needs decongestion. A city like Mumbai is very unique and it's very different from, let's say, the NCR, the National Capital Region. I often say that the National Capital Region is really a region which is governed and administered by 4 states, by the Delhi government, by the UP government, which is Noida, by the Haryana government for Gurgaon, and parts of Rajasthan as well. And in essence, 4 state governments are competing for their NCR pie. That competition also leads to innovation. It leads to better infrastructure. Noida will say, don't go to Gurgaon, come to Noida. We're better prepared to deal with monsoons. Gurgaon will say, or Delhi will say, don't go to either of them, come to us. Mumbai doesn't have that. Mumbai is, or the MMR region is part of one state. So it's left to the state, one state alone, to govern and provide better resources and better infrastructure for Mumbai and the MMR region. I think one concern that I have, which is not just unique to Mumbai, but is unique to many cities in India, because India and China being the fastest growing countries in the world, one trend which is common across both countries is the rapid pace of urbanization. People leaving rural areas, moving to cities. That creates all kinds of strains on our cities. It creates political strains. It leads to parties who say that the cities belong to locals, not to outsiders. It muddies the political waters. And it also puts a massive strain on the infrastructure. One concern that I have is when I talk to people who've lived in Mumbai all their life, and I ask them a simple question: who is the mayor of Mumbai? Nobody knows the answer to that question. And that is a very troubling phenomena for me, because if you go to any large metro anywhere in the world, if you go to London City, if you go to New York City, people know who the mayor is, not who the governor of that state is. For instance, people in New York City know who the mayor of New York is, not who the governor of New York State is. In India, in most Indian cities, it's the opposite. And in Mumbai, people are woefully unaware of who their mayor is. So if you don't know who your mayor is, that means there's no accountability. And if there's no accountability, you don't get good governance. So I've been a huge proponent of changes in the way the municipality of Mumbai, which is India's richest municipality, it's one of the richest municipalities in all of Asia, should govern itself. I, for one, believe that the mayor of Mumbai city and of many cities in Maharashtra and India should be directly elected by the people of that city. And eventually more and more resources of the state that relate to that city should devolve to that city. So for instance, today in Mumbai, the stormwater drains, your water, your sanitation is controlled by the municipality, where you have a mayor who is not directly elected by the people. Your policing, your law and order is controlled by the Home Ministry, which is controlled by the state government of Maharashtra. This anomaly doesn't exist in most cities around the world. In New York City, for instance, the mayor appoints the police commissioner. So these are the kind of reforms that I think we need. For a long time, India has been primarily a rural agrarian economy. With urbanization happening, I think it's imperative that political leaders, policymakers, and ultimately the public, the voters, you and I, must influence the political discourse to have more devolution and more administrative reforms, especially in urban areas.
Right. So I completely agree with what you're saying. And I think Mumbai as a city has evolved in so many years. And I think all of us sitting here are looking forward, for our city to become like the Shanghai of India. Thank you again, sir. And let's move on to the next question. India recently launched Chandrayaan-3 on 14th July, and it indeed was a moment where most of us, were glued to our television screens. So you very eloquently tweeted that, Chandrayaan-3 marks a great leap for India and its scientific community. It is definitely a mission that we all hope turns out to be a great and a huge success. Would you like to share your thoughts, sir, on, how the success of such missions would impact our Indian society?
Sure. Let me firstly elevate the discussion to a little bit, about space. Firstly, I think it's important to put space into perspective, and that's what I always do for myself. We think we're living in Mumbai, we're living in India. Essentially, we're living on a rock floating in the middle of a very violent universe. We shouldn't forget the fact that 65 million years ago, there were dinosaurs who lived on this planet. An entire species was wiped out because an asteroid hit Earth and caused a ripple effect across the planet. So it can happen tomorrow as well. Tomorrow we could have a comet which hits Earth and we all say goodbye. We could have a volcanic eruption which has happened in the past, and you can have a cloud of ash and dust which will lower the temperature, lead to famines, lead to all kinds of situations. So I think moving to space, exploring space, not just to launch a satellite, which allows us to communicate with one another. Like we have these low Earth orbiting satellites, companies like SpaceX run by Elon Musk do. Exploring space, creating an alternative place for humans to live in, besides Earth, is of critical importance. And I think in that sense, India has had a very exciting space program led largely by the government, ISRO, the Space Research Organization, which we've been doing significant work for 60 years in space. We've been in many areas better than agencies like NASA, better than the European Space Agency. But we are pretty late in opening up the space sector to the private sector. So China, for instance, opened up space to the private sector 10 years ago. India did that only recently. The US did that a long time ago, which is why today you have the most efficient rockets, which can send a payload to space at the lowest cost possible, run by private companies in America. So Chandrayaan was a significant step in the fact that we will be one of 4 countries that will be able to reach the moon. But I think it's important that our private sector invests more in space research, in technology. There are some areas we can't compete as effectively against an American private company like SpaceX, but there are other areas where we can. And I think space is also an area, Kavya, where the politics that you see on planet Earth, the geopolitics, America, China tensions, for instance. Space is an area where humans should put aside those differences and work together. A good example is the International Space Station. In the peak of the Cold War, when the US and Russia were fighting tooth and nail, despite that, the US and Russia jointly developed the International Space Station. So there's hope that space as a frontier, which has been unexplored, and which, who knows how large the universe is, it could be infinite. That's an area where we as humans should put aside our differences and explore it jointly. But I think that India the policies are in the right place. I can see in the years ahead, in the decades ahead, that you will see more private sector, Indian private sector investment in space in the same way that you're seeing in countries like China, European countries, and America.
Great, sir. So we are, hoping that space gets integrated and, our Indian society becomes one when, such missions happen. As I said, it's like how all of us unite and, switch on our TVs and we are glued to it because we want to see the success of all the hard work that's been put into for Chandrayaan-3 or for any other
I
mission
think
for that matter.
I would say that, it's not just Indian society. I think the world takes notice of these missions because personally for me, even if another country launched a successful rocket and explored a moon in Jupiter or Saturn, which might be habitable moons for human beings, it's exciting for me because it's a leap for the human race. And I think that's the spirit with which the world and different governments should treat these missions.
Right. So moving on to our next question, 2019, 2020 was the year of the pandemic. So owing to the COVID-19 pandemic, remote working has become an emerging trend amongst businesses today. Even most IT companies I see and hear of prefer calling their employees on a hybrid mode basis. What would your advice be to today's leaders, who are trying to build the right culture for remote teams?
I think that's a very tricky question because I'm not so convinced that working remotely is the best thing. I think it depends industry to industry. I mean, this is a good example right now. Your college is under construction, it's being repaired. We're doing this virtually, no problem. But there's no substitute to physical interactions. But I would say beyond that, at a more philosophical, spiritual level, I think what COVID taught all of us is that, we are a social species. Human beings need social interactions, but it did teach us and remind us that sometimes solitude is also important. And, there's this old movement that existed in the US, which was influenced by some of our Vedic culture called transcendentalism. And there was a man called Henry David Thoreau who coined the phrase civil disobedience, who in turn influenced Mahatma Gandhi. And transcendentalism essentially meant moving away from this, this social lifestyle and going and living in the woods all alone by yourself, maybe with your family, having a homestead, and living sustainably off the forests and off nature. So I think COVID did bring that about in a lot of people. I think that there is that if you go to restaurants, you go to, I'm sure as young people do, you go to nightclubs, you go to different places. Places are more packed than they were before COVID. There's what they call revenge buying, revenge spending. But I think it's important to remember that the pandemic also taught us that there's a huge virtue in being able to sit in silence on your own and being comfortable living within your own skin. That's very, very critical because that's a life lesson. If you're not able to live happily on your own, nothing is going to make you happy in this world. So that's what I took away from COVID. Now, should people work at home? Should people work remotely? Should they go to offices? I don't know. That depends. A lot of people can't, frankly, afford to work remotely. I think we should be mindful of that. In a city like Mumbai, for instance, where half the population lives in congested slums, in a small slum of 100 square feet, you have a family living there. There's no social distancing there. There's no privacy there. There's no way for somebody to conduct a call over there. You don't even have an attached toilet. So those people are forced to want to leave, go to work, give a break to their family. But as I said, it depends industry to industry. There's also this controversy in the IT sector where the IT industries, the IT-enabled companies like Wipro and Infosys aren't happy about employees working from home and moonlighting, essentially having more than one job and not just being Infosys or Wipro employees, but also doing this for another company. So there are those concerns as well. Those are ethical, moral concerns, legal concerns between an employee and an employer. So these are things we have to think about. And I don't think there's a hard and fast rule. I think it depends on a company, depends on the industry, depends on the company's culture.
So I think today's generation prefers this flexible, working, wherein it's hybrid, some days online, some days offline. And leaders face an issue because people are not they're not happy to be called offline or to come to work in the office. So what are your thoughts on how to tackle such types of situations?
Again, as I said, it depends on company to company, industry to industry. If there's a company, small business, which can allow for, let's say there's a legal company, a law firm, and you can allow for the employee to study cases, to prepare for litigation from home, there's no harm. You don't have to have them come to the office. So it depends. It really depends case to case, industry to industry, employee to employee. So I don't really have any hard and fast rule. I think that there's a reset after the pandemic, and there's a massive reset in terms of how people work, how people think, how people interact with one another. And maybe in a few years, things will settle back to the way they were before. Maybe they won't. Maybe there'll be a new normal. There was a huge, right after COVID, in the West and even in India to a large extent, you had this phenomena called the Great Resignations, where people were just resigning from the job that they were trained to do and were choosing to do different things. And there were all kinds of, strange things happening in the workforce. In the US, for instance, you had aeronautical engineers resigning to become bartenders. So who's to say what's right and what's wrong? The workforce changed, industry changed. In India, for instance, you had downward mobility in a way. You had a waiter in a restaurant having to become a Swiggy delivery boy. In some ways, it changed for the better. In some ways, it changed for the worse. But I do believe that when you have such a large global event like a pandemic, you will have these kinds of resets, and there's no hard and fast rule.
Right. So as you said, sir, owing to the new normal, these days, artificial intelligence is the buzz. And I think a very popular example amongst students is ChatGPT. And I think most of them even use it for projects and assignments. So do you think that us using platforms like ChatGPT will make us stop using our own creativity? Because as leaders of maybe different clubs also or societies in our college, we come across this issue, I think, on a daily basis where, we give a task to our team members and they just ChatGPT it and they give the answers back to us. So, sir, what are your thoughts on this?
It's a good question. I'm speaking to a college, so I think it would be better if the college faculty answers this question. But I see AI as inevitable. I see these changes and these evolutions in technology as inevitable. I think education will have to change with the changing times. My profession, politics, will have to change with the changing times. Sometimes when I'm very busy, but I want to tweet on something, I often ask ChatGPT to draft me a tweet. I don't see a moral or ethical issue with doing that. Yes, I do see a problem wherein if I'm asked to draft an essay as a student, or even if I'm asked to make a speech, and I ask ChatGPT, I outsource that speech writing to ChatGPT or that essay to ChatGPT, I do see an issue, not so much, again, an ethical issue, but I see an issue of originality, because then is my speech original? Is it truly coming from me? And that may not be something that I'll be judged by the audience, or that a student will be judged by their faculty. But that's about you as the individual wanting to retain your individuality and your originality. And if that doesn't matter to you, you don't want to be an original person, you want to be one of many people using ChatGPT, then so be it. You'll never be an original person. If you want originality, you can get research points from ChatGPT.
Correct.
But it's always important it's like in public speaking. I know a lot of people in politics who, imitate a certain style, who would have a speech writer to write their speech. I always chose not to do that. I always said, let the audience say that Milind is a poor speaker. He's a bad orator. He's not an effective communicator. But for me, originality is extremely critical. And so in that sense, ChatGPT AI, I think, brings great promise, because if you use it in the right way, it's fantastic. I mean, it's incredible. I don't use Google anymore, and I pretty much, my search now is limited to ChatGPT and YouTube. So if I want to search about something, I'm curious. For instance, recently I was curious about something to do with space, by the way. And normally I would search on Google, and then I would have to look at 4 or 5 articles, papers that were published, and then it takes a long time. And then you have to sort of collate that in your head and then frame your own opinion.
Correct.
Now I just go to YouTube, and there'll be a video ready waiting for me by a YouTuber, a vlogger, and you get a perspective in 3 to 5 minutes. You want it on text, ChatGPT. So these are effective ways of the way you search. In time, what will happen is with ChatGPT and beyond, because ChatGPT is essentially a few companies. There's Microsoft, there's Elon Musk who invested in it. There's many people getting into AI. Google has its own AI plan. Meta has its own AI plan. Eventually, what will happen, Kavya, is today when you feel like you want to go and eat at a restaurant, you say, I want to eat Chinese food with my friends. You search on an app on Zomato or TripAdvisor, whichever, or Google Maps, and you'll see which restaurant's close to me, how it's rated. In time, search will become so refined and AI will be so predictive that it will be able to tell you that, Kavya, you haven't eaten Chinese food for about a week and your body is craving Chinese food. And tonight you should go to this Chinese restaurant since you're going to be watching a movie close to that part of town. Now, is that good? Is that bad? It's an interesting question, because essentially a computer and a machine knows more about you, or as much about you as you know about yourself. And It's so predictive that it's preempting what you're going to think. And now, the doomsday scenario, the people who are the doomsayers will say that, they'll remind you of movies like Terminator, and they'll remind you of movies like The Matrix, which talk about how AI has taken over the human race now. So there are those concerns, but it's an inevitability. And I think that you can't deny that AI is here to stay. In politics, for instance, it's changed politics, and it's going to transform politics. There's something called deep fakes. You can completely change what a politician is saying with deep fakes. You can have, I'm talking to you now. If someone took that, this video of me, and you fed it into an AI app, and the AI app learned my features and my hand movements, it could then have me saying something completely controversial, and it would look real, sound real. So these are things which are concerning, and we all have to be on our toes. But I do believe that the benefits of these technologies will outweigh the cons, just like using a phone does.
So I think the way an individual uses it is more important, than just saying this is a disadvantage or this is an advantage. Because as you said, when you research for points, you get some very good points from ChatGPT. We as students use it, I think, on a daily basis. And rather than just, copying an article or something, to get some brownie points from it and then convert it to your own, I think it's really amazing.
These things, to me, these things call for self-regulation. I don't think beyond a point, governments, tech companies will be able to regulate these changes. That's my personal view.
Right.
I've been in the Ministry of Information Technology in the government of India. No government, not just the Indian government, has ultimately the resources to be one step ahead of disruptive technologies. So ultimately, it's self-regulation. They say Instagram, TikTok pushes dangerous content sometimes, but it's finally left to self-regulation. Ultimately, it's at your home. Your parents have to regulate how children use social media, when they should use a phone. You have to self-regulate how much of this stuff you use.
Okay. So, sir, linking social media to another question, everyone is glued to social media these days, for the good or for the bad. But how do you think social media is, influencing leadership styles these days? Any thoughts?
Well, it's having a massive influence or a massive change in the way, in what is expected from leaders. So, essentially, what has happened is, if you look at the way news was consumed 10 years ago, 10 years ago, you had a newspaper that arrived at your home or in your office every morning. You read a story, and it took 24 hours for that news cycle to play out. And the next day, that same newspaper would print a follow-up story. They would take your interview. And so the news cycles were 24 hours. With the advent of television media and TV news, that news cycle shrunk. A story had a 7-hour life cycle. And then 7 hours later, there was a news story. And then for 7 hours, you would chase that and say breaking news, and then you would have another story. With social media now, you have news cycles that have shrunk to a few minutes. There's a tweet, there's outrage for 1 hour, and then 1 hour later, there's another tweet, and there's another news story, and then so it's extremely distracting. It's made everybody a journalist, everyone an opinion maker, despite people who don't really have opinions on subjects. So today, if there's flooding, everyone has an opinion on why Mumbai is flooding, without any knowledge of why Mumbai is flooding. If there's violence in Manipur, everyone has an opinion on what's happening in Manipur, despite nobody really knowing what's happening in Manipur. If a rocket goes to space, everyone has an opinion on what's going to happen with that. And you're not just do you have an opinion and keep it to yourself, but you're posting that opinion publicly without, in 140 characters on Twitter, for instance, or 280 characters. And that is extremely dangerous, because that's making leaders respond to opinions that are extremely, that have not been formed properly. And what that does is it's creating this communication cycle where, again, as I said in my opening remarks, a politician is judged for their communication style, how fast they respond to a tweet, how effectively they communicate, how good is their draft, how good is their spoken word, or their written word, as compared to what they really stand for. So that is the danger in where leadership is headed. I gave you the example of Hitler and Gandhi. Hitler was by far a better orator than Mahatma Gandhi. Mahatma Gandhi was known for simple speeches. Hitler was a rabble-rouser. But whose leadership do we ultimately respect? Gandhi's, right? But I fear that in today's day and age, we are putting more emphasis on communication skills. So to answer your question, social media is distorting the parameters by which we judge and determine who are good leaders. And again, it calls for self-regulation, where you and I, the individual, the consumer of leadership skills and leadership values, have to be discerning enough to understand and distinguish between what we want in a leader. Should a politician's views, opinions, actions matter more than their communication skills, or is it the other way around? Should a businessman's actions, quality of governance, innovation, disruption matter more than their communication skills, or is it the other way around? And I have many examples of that distortion, which I wouldn't want to name people, but in India and abroad, in politics and business. In the entertainment sector, for instance, should an actor's performance in a movie be more important than their Instagram feeds? It's distorted today. Sometimes celebrities are known because of their Instagram feeds, not because of their performance in a movie.
Completely agree.
Should a musician's songwriting abilities, live performance abilities be more important than their social media posts? So again, these are trends which you can't stop, but these things call for self-regulation and self-introspection.
Yes. Thank you, sir. And before we open the platform for the students, I request you all to refrain from asking any personal or contentious questions. The floor is now open for questions. I think we've already received one. Sir, what are your views on India should have more youth leaders in the government?
Absolutely. I've always believed that we should have more young people in government. But, I've always been of the view, even when I fought my first election in when I was 27 years old, in 2004. And at that time, my opponent was, I think, 65 or 66 years old. I always said, don't vote for me because I'm a young person, because I have nothing to do with my age. I didn't determine the day I was born. I didn't determine my gender. Young people are important. You also need a good balance between youth and age, youth and experience. And frankly, when we say more young people, I also feel, what kind of young people? Do you want I want younger people who are progressive. I want younger people who want to take India forward in the direction that I believe India should go forward. I don't want a young person who's young at age, but is a rabble-rouser, is someone who I don't believe stands for the right values. So again, like I gave you the example of an entertainer, its values are more important to me than age. You could have somebody who's 65, 66, 70, 80, but who has the right values and has better values than a young person. So if there's a person with the right values, certainly younger people with a mix of experience is a very, very lethal and powerful combination to take our country forward.
Great. Coming to the next question, how can youth leaders develop and maintain a healthy work-life balance while fulfilling their leadership responsibilities?
Well, I think, look, paradigms have changed in today's day and age. 30 years ago, 20 years ago, when I joined politics, in business, in any profession, entertainment, it was cool to say, oh, I haven't slept for 2 days and I'm working so hard. The world is changing. Today, it's not. Today, if you say, it's cool to say, if you say I haven't slept for 2 days, and it's much cooler to say I sleep well, I exercised this morning before coming to today's meeting. Maybe I meditated a bit. There is a convergence between my mind, body, soul. So the paradigm has shifted. No longer is a company looking at an employee who just says, I work extremely hard, there's only work and no play. Today, companies, employers in the private sector, even in the public sector, even in politics, for instance, the employer being the voter, understand that a work-life balance is very, very important. And nobody wants an employee to be burnt out. So I think it's very critical today. And it wasn't the case 20 years ago, frankly, when I got into politics. I was, for instance, myself burning out. I thought, my job was just to work. And I didn't pay any attention to my health, my mental health, my physical health. And Today that's changed. Today it's important to say that I'm going to pace myself. And while you're ambitious, you've set goals for yourself. Don't be attached to those goals. Focus on your work-life balance. That's critical. A lot of success happens because of luck, beyond how many hours you put in. So my message to the person who asked that question would be ambitious, set goals for yourself, but under no circumstances is it worth destroying your work-life balance for those goals. And in fact, if you do that, eventually your employer, your investor, your voter will know that you're burning out. And in the long run, that will harm you more than it will help you.
Correct. Another question that we've received is, it is said that growth is a continuous process and so is learning. What aspects of leadership would you say you are still striving to learn while simultaneously leading others?
Leadership is an ocean. It's something you never learn. It's like I for one believe that, to me, the something that has changed about me is I'm no longer afraid to say I don't know. And when I was younger, maybe when you're younger, you're a bit brasher, you're a little more, you think you have the solutions to the keys to unlock the secrets of the universe. And you're also under this pressure that you have to know everything. And so in that era of my life where I was overly informed about the world, I had an opinion on everything. And now I've realized it's okay and it's better. It's smarter. I'm using my words carefully. It's smarter not to have an opinion about everything. It's smarter to say, I don't know. Because if you don't say that and you think you know everything, you will never learn. And you will never allow others who are experts in a certain field to express themselves. Yeah. So in a small way, for instance, on social media, on Twitter, I would earlier comment on anything that happened. News item broke today, comment, as if I'm an expert on it. I don't do that anymore. If there's something I feel passionately about, yes, I will comment. If there's something I've learned about, I've applied my mind to, I have done research on, I'll take time. I may miss that news cycle where your tweet will get 1,000 retweets because you were the first to tweet about it. But it's more important to say, I don't know. And that to me is something which great leaders in business, since many of you are business students, Bill Gates calls it unconfused. He says, I'm not afraid to go into meetings and say I'm confused. And can you please help unconfuse me? So that's a trait of good leadership, not to know, not to pontificate and say this is how you should do it, but to say, please tell me, and I have no idea.
Right. So we've got similar questions regarding this. How do you think today's young leaders must effectively shut down anything but constructive criticism?
How do you think young leaders must shut down anything but constructive criticism?
Yes. So basically, what they want to say is, I think, leadership brings a lot of critics. So how to deal with that, how to deal with criticism, and at the same time, take it and accept it gracefully.
Be true to yourself. Know what you're doing. Know what you're saying. You're saying something from the heart. Sometimes you make mistakes. In my profession, for instance, you say something you didn't mean. It's okay. It's okay to do that and to accept that you made a mistake. I think leadership is all about, controlling your ego. And if you don't let your ego take control of you, it's okay to accept mistakes. This notion that you can't accept a mistake, or because you're being criticized for something you did wrong, you have to fight back against that criticism and hold your position. That's wrong. That's not leadership. No great leader anywhere in any profession in the world, today or historically or in the future, will be somebody who does not admit to their mistakes, does not admit they're wrong, does not admit that they don't know what they've done. And so I for one, I never paid attention to negative criticism. To constructive criticism, I always encouraged it. I always encouraged people saying, Milind, you're wrong. Can you do this better? And this is how you should do it better. Negative criticism, they're just people who criticize, who just, they're what you call haters. And those are typically people who are unhappy within themselves. They're the ones, there's a poll, in fact, where they said that most trolls on Twitter, for instance, minus the chat, the bots that don't really exist, but the real people on Twitter who love to troll, say, celebrities, politicians, are typically people who unfortunately are not comfortable with themselves. And they're taking out those inner problems, those internal issues, and manifesting it against somebody else. So I actually empathize and sympathize with them, not really see it in a bad way. I actually feel if there's a way I can reach out to help them, that's better than getting into a Twitter war with them, fighting with them, countering them. Because I think they need a helping hand more than anything else. That's my attitude. Maybe it's a more benign attitude, but I know people who kind of like the fight.
Right. Another question that we've received is, sir, what are your opinions about introducing real politics as a subject matter in all streams in college to create new young political leaders with organic political skills?
Did the question say real politic or real politics?
Real politics.
Real politics. Okay, because there's a big difference between real politic and real politics. Well, I for one have always said this. I've never shied away from the fact that I was able to get this platform to fight a Lok Sabha election at the age of 27 because I came from a political background. And I had that unfair advantage, which gave me a foot in the door. But I think that, and when people would say, Milind, you were one of the youngest members of parliament. Yes, I was, but I would be prouder if I saw younger people who came from no political background. Because that means that our grassroots political movement is so robust, it's so healthy, it's so democratic and meritocratic that it's throwing up leaders with no political background to become, the future leaders who can lead the country. So I think that some parties are doing that. Some parties are doing that successfully, others are not. Some political parties are doing it successfully in some states, not in others. There are many examples of that. I mean, one day we could have a longer political conversation about this. But in principle, I do agree with the point that, how do you really create leadership in classrooms? How do you really create leaderships at a university level, at a college level? We have a pretty robust system of politics in universities, not so much in a city like Mumbai. In Delhi, for instance, you have a very, very robust political culture in universities. If you go to Delhi University, you go to many of these, there are heated political arguments. Mumbai is a little different in terms of its politics. Mumbai is like we are like a separate place altogether. We sometimes we think Mumbai, we're cocooned into this large metropolis that we live in. But I think that having a vibrant political culture in universities, colleges is absolutely integral to bring out the right kind of leaders. For instance, my daughter, she's 5.5 years old. I'm trying to encourage her at her age. Of course, she's very young, but to have to participate in debates and just to sort of get used to the idea of debating, because I think those are the challenges and those are the skill sets that will be required for young people going forward. As politics, as politics gets more polarized, more divided, as people get far more opinionated and sides get chosen. You either hate this politician or you love this politician. There's no in between. I think it will be very critical for younger people to be able to have nuanced arguments and to make nuanced cases as to why a middle path needs to be chosen.
Thank you, sir. Our next question is, what is your take on AI and unemployment that seems to be rising, and how can we solve such a problem?
That's a tricky one because, look, there is this debate between, as to whether AI will solve the unemployment issue or make it worse. And frankly, again, nobody has an answer. Time will tell. People said that computers, when computers came about 20, 30, 40 years ago, will make people redundant. It hasn't. So it's made people more productive. So you can't tell what will happen. There is also this debate, for instance, there's this technology called 3D printing, which is a sort of, it's an innovation in manufacturing. So, for example, in a car company that manufactures cars, the assembly line, it's still more effective than 3D printing. But there is a debate that when 3D printing goes mainstream, will people become redundant? Will robotics make people redundant? Could happen. But again, it's hard to say. But I believe that the human race will, market forces will tell us as a human race, how many children should we have? If the world is moving to a situation where there's mass unemployment, people will stop having 2, 3, 4 children. Maybe they'll just have one child. So I think that those are market forces that will determine those things. Take a country like China. China had a one-child policy for a long time. Now China has a huge aging population problem. Despite having a one-child policy, today there's rampant unemployment in China. So it's a tricky situation. Do you solve? So it's very hard to predict these things. It's very hard to say what will be the impact of AI, robotics, 3D printing on unemployment. My sense is that human beings, societally, within their families, culturally, will adapt to those changes. And as a result of which, you really won't have the kind of mass unemployment that naysayers talk about. You'll in fact have more productivity.
Okay. Next question is, what advice would you like to give the young bloods who are passionate about bringing a change at a relatively younger age?
My advice to younger people who want to bring a change in society, very honestly, and I say this as someone who's in politics, there was a time when our democratic institutions were set up in India and around the world, when politics was the most significant way of bringing about positive change in society. That has changed radically in the last 10, 20, 50 years. You can make change and bring about change by being a social media influencer, for instance. You can make sometimes as much, if not more change, being an effective social media influencer, a YouTuber, than you can as a very, very active elected representative. You can make change by being an environmental engineer than you can as a politician. If you ask me today, the future of, we've talked a lot about AI today, but really the biggest, most exciting field going forward is environmental engineering. How are we going to solve this climate problem? We're talking about hydrogen, we're talking about green hydrogen, we're talking about solar panels. Nuclear may come back tomorrow. We're talking about future technologies like geoengineering, where you there's a man-made way of reducing temperatures by putting chemicals up in the air and reducing the sun's rays that fall to Earth. They're talking about satellites in space that are closer to the sun, where the sun's heat and solar energy is not obscured by clouds and the Earth's atmosphere, and can then get that solar energy and transmit it to Earth. So these future technologies, there's wave energy today. There's the waves on the ocean. They're going untapped. There's enormous energy if you tap waves. There's tidal energy. A city like Mumbai is a tidal city. Tides come in, tides go out. When tides come in, you can harness that energy. So all of these things, there's so many futuristic sources of energy, nuclear fusion, which they say is the holy grail, which is essentially creating the power of the sun over right here on Earth. I sometimes think about it, when we talk about ourselves and all our problems, Kavya, ultimately, who are we as humans at a philosophical, spiritual level, or a scientific level, or an atomic level? Each of us at an atomic level is 65% hydrogen, 20% oxygen, 12% carbon, and then the rest, different elements. So 65% of human beings are the same element that the sun is made up of. So we are creating energy within ourselves. Who knows what the future of energy will look like? To me, that's a very exciting field. And I think all these are ways, becoming an environmental engineer, being a social media influencer. There are multiple ways of bringing about change. Being a business person with the right corporate ethics. All these are equally, if not more effective ways than being a politician. I think being a politician and politics is a very overrated method of bringing about change today. There are many other more effective ways.
Thank you so much, sir. And thank you to all the students as well for the questions. I think we received a lot of them, but due to the time constraint, I had to pick a few of them only. And it has been such a pleasure to moderate today's session. And I would like to hand it over to Ansha and Neha. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks, Kavya.
Thank
Did
you
a very
so
good
much,
job.
sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Kavya. So that brings us to the end of this session. A very well-rounded session exploring a wide range of topics from our little city Mumbai to worldly, in fact, universal matters like space exploration. Mr. Milind Deora's valuable insights into such topics have not just been captivating and engaging, but extremely factual and edifying.
That's right. Light was shed upon topics ranging from a past traditional workforce to an AI-administered world. Media, leadership, as well as youth of today also subject matters in today's lively discussion. To say, in today's enlightening session, Sir shared a powerful insight that truly resonates with the essence of personal growth. The profound statement, "I am no more afraid to say I don't know," speaks volume about the virtues of humility, curiosity, and the journey of continuous learning.
So guys, as we step upon this enthralling journey together, I encourage all of you to embrace every opportunity, to learn every chance you get and make the most of this phase in your lives. We are thrilled to have you here and are confident that you will make your loved ones proud.
Thank you for joining us today. We hope that you continue to contribute to this community's legacy and become virtuous leaders of an upstanding tomorrow. Once again, thank you so much, Mr. Milind Deora, for your time. And thank you everyone for joining in. We hope to see you back again for another edifying session. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for your time. It was great to hear you. There are some very
Most
interesting
welcome,
questions.
Dr.
I wish you could answer all of them.
Another
Yes,
session whenever you
I think
invite me.
we got a very good number of questions, and I think all of us were wanting to hear more and more from you. But there's always a next time. And
Pleasure. Anytime. I'm always available for HR College, for your faculty, for the students. It's always a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Thank you
Thank
so
you,
much,
sir.
sir.
Thank
Have
you.
a great day ahead.